This conference will now be recorded.
We have with us CA Subodh Shah sir from Pune, a renowned speaker, and he will be sharing his knowledge and views on issues in Section 56 of the Income Tax Act. Sir, just to brief you, sir, this webinar is organized by Hindu Social Group, and we have been engaged in trying to keep the spirits high. In this lockdown period, we have been holding several webinars on various diverse topics. In fact, yesterday we had a yoga webinar, sir, and that we had a session on markets and so on. I request all the attendees to please just keep their mic, have a look, and keep their mics on mute. By default, they are in mute mode. But in case by mistake it gets on to the unmute mode, please mute it again. You can raise your queries in the chat window. With the chat window appearing on your screen, you can raise your queries on your chat window. Permits, we will handle the queries. Over to you, Unmesh sir.
Yeah.
Unmesh sir.
Thank you, Nikunj, and
Yes,
good morning to all of you. Very warm welcome to Subodh Shah, CA Subodh Shah from Pune. In this Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, he is ready to share his thoughts and expert knowledge on the very important subject. I think this subject is very important at this stage because the section 56, that is relevant for the other income, and probably at this stage everybody is looking from other income only because the professional income is almost zero because of COVID-19. And a very apt and relevant subject is going to be discussed by a learned faculty, Subodh Shah. It's my pleasure to introduce the renowned faculty to all the participants from our area. I will just highlight, it's a long profile, but I will highlight in a very short points, important points. A qualified chartered accountant, as well as is completed his DSA qualification from ICA. Rank, he's holding rank in the Inter CA, third rank in All India Merit, then final CA, 17th rank in All India Merit, first in direct taxes, completed his system audit course with 90% marks, having more than 25 years of practice, and again a very vast experience in the teaching field, teaching for CA students the subject of cost accounting and taxation for 25 years. Was a former president of Alliance Franchises de Pune, an institution teaching French language in Pune. Then former chairman of Pune branch of ICAI, as a regular speaker at various seminars on the topics of direct tax, GST and accounting, as well as the founder of Excellent Professional Academy, an institution coaching for CA students, and so many more things. Definitely a person of a high experience in this subject, and we are very fortunate that our Subodh sir has kindly accepted our invitation and today over here to share his knowledge, expert knowledge on Section 56 of Income Tax Act. Sir, on behalf of CA, Bhayandar CA Social Group, as well as all the participants, I present a warm welcome to you, and I really appreciate for you being over here for sharing your thoughts. A warm welcome to all of you, sir, as well as you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Nikunj. Over to you. Thanks a lot.
Sir, you may. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Subodh sir. Subodh
Yes.
sir.
Okay.
Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you, Nikunj, and thank you, Unmesh, for the kind words. And let us now begin with the topic for the day. The topic for the day is primarily issues in section 56 to 10. That is the main focus, the agenda for today's discussion. We are aware that section 56 to 7 was there, and then today we have 56 to 10. And after 56 to 10 was introduced, the scope of this provision has gone so wide that today it has opened a Pandora's box. Many transactions which we never thought could be covered under this provision are now getting covered under this provision of 56.2. So at the outset, let us have a quick journey as to the development evolution of these provisions. We are aware that in India we had the Gift Tax Act. The Gift Tax Act came to an end on 30th September 1998, and it was a donor-based tax. Then from 1st October 98 till 31st August 2004, India was a gift-free country. In the sense, we could receive gift, we could give a gift, and there was no implication of taxation at all. And thereafter, instead of bringing back the Gift Tax Act, the gift tax made an entry via Section 56(2) Roman 5, 1st September 2004 to 31st March 6. But when this section was brought in, it was brought in for gifts received by individual or NHUF and for amounts received in money. And the section was so badly drafted that you could practically take lakhs of rupees of gifts and still you would not be covered under Section 56(2)(5). The government realized the mistake and they made amendments, and Section 56(2)(5) was replaced by subclass 6 from 1st September 6 up to 30th September 2009, in which they brought in the concept of gifts in money, but aggregate amount in a year should not exceed 50,000. If it exceeds 50,000, it got taxable. Though the section was well drafted, one loophole still remained, and that is gifts in kind. That is, gift of immovable property or gold or jewelry, shares, was not taxable. So this subclass 6 was then replaced by subclass 7 from 1st October 2009, and this continued up to 31st March 17, wherein any gifts received by individual or HUF, whether in cash or kind, were getting taxed, of course subject to certain exemptions. Then came this deadly provision, that is 56(2) subclass 10 from 1st September 2017. Now, principally we are aware that the section was brought in to cover the gifts, but now what they said, from 1/4/17, gifts received by any person from any person. So earlier, if I was a corporate entity, a private limited company, I never had to bother about 56(2)(10). But today, if I'm a partnership firm, I'm a company, I'm an AOP, BOI, all cases, I will have to look into the implications of 56(2)(10), which earlier I never would have even dreamt of looking at. So 56(2) Roman 10 covers 3 areas of gifts. I'm first going to take a quick recap of the basic provisions. Once the basic provisions we have recapped, then we will start with the issues rather than directly jumping to the issues, right? So today, 3 categories of gifts are taxable. Though we are continuously going to talk of the word gifts, section में कहीं भी gift ये शब्द है नहीं. The entire section talks of amount received without consideration or amount received with inadequate consideration. So 3 areas of taxation of gifts. First, sum of money. Second is taxation of immovable property. Third is taxation of other assets. So the first provision is if any person receives a sum of money without consideration from one or more persons and the aggregate amount in a year exceeds 50,000, entire aggregate amount is taxable. So what is taxable? Aggregate amount gets taxed. The second part talks of immovable property. Immovable property, if you receive immovable property without any consideration, then if the stamp duty value is more than 50,000, entire stamp duty value is taxable as income. Obviously 50,000 is a limit which is irrelevant in an immovable property anywhere in the country. Even in jungle you will not find 50,000 valuation. For inadequate consideration, now this is the dangerous clause because this is a clause which many times covers many genuine cases. If you receive an immovable property for inadequate consideration and if the stamp duty value minus the actual consideration is more than 50,000 and also more than 10% of the consideration, then the entire difference will be treated as income. Till last year, this variation was 5%. In fact, in Finance Act 2019, they had put in a 5% flexibility. That flexibility has been increased to 10% by Finance Act 2020. So, as I said, till last year, if the difference between the stamp duty value and the consideration was not exceeding 5% of the consideration, then we were accepting the consideration as it is and the difference was not getting taxed. Now this variation has been increased up to 10%. So that's a better flexibility which is now available. On the other hand, the third category of gifts which is taxable is other property. So what do you mean by other property? Other property received without consideration, when is it taxable? If the aggregate fair market value of such other property, we will see what is other, aggregate market value of this other property exceeds 50,000, aggregate fair market value is taxable. And finally, the fifth category, if I receive other property for inadequate consideration, and if the aggregate fair market value exceeds the consideration by exceeds the actual 50,000, again the difference is taxable. So sum of money 50,000, immovable property without consideration, inadequate consideration, other assets without consideration and inadequate consideration. I'm going a bit fast on these basic points because this is a basic revision of the primary provisions. For immovable property, of course, the stamp duty valuation, we are allowed to take the stamp duty value of the earlier date when the agreement was entered into rather than when it was registered, subject to certain conditions being satisfied. But let's now come to very, very important point as far as these gifts are concerned. And that is meaning of the word property. Under section 56(2), you will find in subclass 7, the property has been defined. And this is one definition we are going to come back many times throughout today's discussion. And the definition of the word property is property means. So at the very outset, it begins with the word property means yani ye exhaustive definition hai. If it is an exhaustive definition, it means property means this list and nothing other than what is mentioned in this list. This is a complete definition. It is not an inclusive definition. So whatever is mentioned here is covered. That's it. Any asset not in this list does not fit into property. And if it is not property, then 100% you are outside the scope of section 56(2)(10). So property means what? Following capital asset of the assessee. Second point, it has to be a capital asset of the assessee. Now, who is the assessee for whom we are charging section 56(2)? From whose angle are we looking at 56(2)(10)? From not donor's point, but from recipient's point. So whoever is receiving the asset, for the recipient, is it a capital asset? Is the test to be applied? The test is not in the hands of the giver. I might be purchasing a flat for my own residence from a builder. For a builder, it is not a capital asset, but it is a capital asset for the recipient, myself. So the entire test of capital asset has to be applied for the recipient. So property means following capital goods, capital asset of the assessee. And what is that? The list is very specific. Immovable property being land or building, shares and securities, jewelry, archaeological collection, drawings, paintings, sculpture, any work of art, and finally bullion. This is an exhaustive list. Any asset other than this would not fit into the definition of property. So therefore, you will see when they are talking of the three clauses relating to taxation of these gifts, you have money on one side, immovable property on the other side, and thirdly, you have all other assets, which will be right from your shares right up to bullion. Entire list will be covered under mischief of other assets. Secondly, there are exceptions. 56(2)(10) has certain exceptions, wherein if the gifts are received in the following situations or from following persons, it would not be taxable. Firstly, if the gift is received from a relative, it is exempt from the provisions of gift tax or provisions of 56. Secondly, gift received on the occasion of marriage of the individual. On the occasion of marriage of the individual. So at the time of marriage, an individual is receiving a gift or gifts from many people. Aggregate amount is exceeding, say, 3-4 lakh rupees. Even then, it could escape the taxation under 56(2)(10). Gift received at the time of will or by way of will or inheritance. So a person has passed away, and on account of his will, you have received, inherited some property, some assets, some money, not covered under 56. Gift received in contemplation of death of the payer. So the person who is giving the gift, he is under the impression that he is about to die, and under that impression, he has given the gift. Such a gift is also exempt in the hands of recipient. Any gift received from a local authority, exempt. Gift from any fund, foundation, university, other educational institution, hospital, medical institution, trust, which is referred to in section 1023C. Now, many times you'll find that the people go to an educational institution and they may get some, what we can say, a scholarship from this educational institution, or you may get some medical assistance from a medical institution, or and these activities were not really meant to be taxable under gifts, and therefore these have been specifically excluded. Very interestingly, we also have gift received from a charitable institution which is recognized, which is registered under section 12 or 12A or 12AA. Shares which are received as a consequence of business reorganization of a cooperative bank or amalgamation demerger of a company. These are specifically excluded. Now this particular clause, after the charitable trust, the shares, all these clauses remaining have come in after that 56 to 10 came into the picture. Prior to 1417, these other exceptions were not there. So today there is an amalgamation. In an amalgamation, I am a shareholder of A Limited. After amalgamation, my shares of A Limited go. In exchange, I get shares of B Limited. The values need not be same. So maybe the shares which I gave up were valued at 2 lakh. Shares which I got were worth 5 lakh. Apparently, I am getting excess value of rupees 3 lakh. That is not to be covered under 56 to 10. Similarly, any gift received by any fund or trust or institution or university or other educational institution or hospital or medical institution. So again, when the charitable institutions, etc., they are receiving the gifts, they would be also exempted from 56 to 10. Of course, they will have to satisfy the conditions of section 11, 12, that's a separate issue. But they will come out of the provisions of section 56. Gift received from an individual by a trust created wholly for the benefit of the relative of the individual. So quite often we make a private trust, and this private trust, we transfer several assets into the private trust for maybe as a part of our estate duty planning, part of our inheritance planning, part of business succession planning. We transfer the assets to this private trust, and this trust is created solely for the benefit of the relative of the individual. Such a transfer, such a transaction where the trust will receive the gift, which is not a charitable trust, but in fact a private trust, will also be exempt under section 56. And finally, any other class of persons as may be prescribed. This clause was added by the last Finance Act 2019. Right. So this, my friends, is the basic exception. Of course, we have the definition of relative. Relative is defined, it's a very, very wide definition. In fact, it is the widest definition of relative which we may find in the entire Income Tax Act. Right? Nowhere else in the Income Tax Act is this definition of relative use. Several places in income tax we have relative used, but very narrow definition. Here, practically everybody gets covered. But this list also has to be understood properly, because here you have in the relative spouse, brother or sister, brother, sister of spouse, brother, sister of parents. So you will find your chacha, mama, they will all get covered. Lineal ascendant, descendant, lineal ascendant, descendant of the spouse, spouse of any other person. So आपकी chachi, mami, pupa, pupi, all these people will get covered. Or अगर आप HUF हो, any member of the HUF is always a relative of the HUF. So far it looks fine. So myself, I receive a gift from my uncle. मेरे पिताजी के भाई यानी मेरे सगे चाचा से मुझे गिफ्ट मिलती है. My uncle fits into the very specific exemption of definition of relative, brother or sister of either of the parents. So भतीजे को चाचा से गिफ्ट मिली, कोई इश्यू नहीं. This is a relation. But the converse unfortunately is not true. the relationship has to be tested from the eyes of the recipient and not from the eyes of the donor. So I am a relative of my uncle, but today I receive a gift from uncle, no problem. If my uncle receives a gift from me, there is a technical problem. It does not fit into this mischief of relative. Why? Simple point here. When uncle receives a gift, वो किससे गिफ्ट ले रहे? And you'll find that in the entire list, Bhatija covered nahi hai. He can receive from his father, his uncle, but he cannot receive from his nephew. So भतीजे से आपने गिफ्ट लिया तो प्रॉब्लम है, लेकिन भतीजे को गिफ्ट दे दिया तो there is no problem. You will be directly covered under the exemption. So this is a very interesting point that same relation एक एंगल से देखा तो गिफ्ट है, फ्रॉम द अदर साइड इट इज नॉट अ सॉरी, एक एंगल से रिलेटिव है, दूसरे एंगल से रिलेटिव नहीं है. Be very clear on this point. These are small issues, but at the assessment level, without realizing, suddenly we are facing a major problem. Next one, and that is about the concept of threshold limit. Now let us understand there are 5 types of transactions covered under 56(2) clause 10. Sum of money without consideration. Secondly, receiving immovable property without consideration. Third, receiving immovable property for inadequate consideration. Fourth, any other property without consideration. And fifth, any other property for inadequate consideration. Threshold limit sub jagah 50,000. But then the question is, do I merge this 50,000 saying, say my friend gave me 20,000 cash, another friend gave me 40,000 rupees gold. So do I merge 20,000 cash and 40,000 gold together? Answer is no. The threshold limit of 50,000 is independently available for each of the 5 categories of gifts. So I will not merge cash gift with a gift in other property. Both cannot be merged. Both have to be taken up separately. Point number 1. Secondly, when we are talking of this category of money or immovable property or other property, whether we talk of money received from one person or aggregate immovable property, one property in a year, or aggregate value of all properties, other properties, single property, or all properties clubbed together, how do we work out this aggregate? That as far as the aggregate is concerned, when you read the section 56(2) clause 10, it's very clear. Aggregate word has been used in 2 instances. Sum of money, aggregate sum of money, and in the case of other property also aggregate. Meaning what? In case of a sum of money, 4 people give me 20,000 each. Total I have received 80,000. Aggregate 80,000 crosses 50,000. Entire aggregate is taxable. Other property, 3 people have given me gold of 25,000. So मुझे 75,000 rupees का gold आ गया without consideration. I will take aggregate of 75,000. Aggregate 75 has crossed 50 and therefore aggregate is taxable. But this aggregate word is missing with respect to immovable property. Of course, very frankly, it doesn't make a big difference because immovable property, the limit of 50,000 anyways is not relevant. Every single immovable property that what we can say automatically crosses the limit of 50,000. So per property the limit is 50,000. Okay, so theoretically there is a difference for immovable property, practically doesn't make a major impact. But now comes a very interesting point. Can we have a setup? Say I am receiving shares of 3 companies. Receiving the sense I have purchased shares of 3 companies. Company X, Y and Z. Each of the shares I have purchased for 3 lakh. Total I have paid 9 lakh. The market value of shares of X is 3 lakh 40. Market value of shares of Y Limited is 2 lakh 60 and of Z company is 330. So question is, in 2 cases I have received the shares, other property I can say, for less than the fair market value. In one case for more than the fair market value. So question is, should I ignore the more than fair market value case and take only the 2 cases जहां पे X 40,000, Z 30,000, total difference is 70,000, tax 70,000, or do I say no? The word used is aggregate, so aggregate fair market value should be compared with the aggregate consideration, and whether only the difference of 30,000 should be considered, and if the difference is below 50,000, then nothing should be taxable. So on a plain reading of the section, my personal view on this is that the word used is very clearly, specifically aggregate fair market value. Aggregate fair market value word has been used as exceeds the aggregate consideration. Therefore, in my opinion, we should compare not piecemeal X, Y, and Z, but we should compare total fair market value of other assets with the total consideration of the other assets. So this is my view, and therefore in the given illustration, 30,000 being below the threshold of 50,000, 30,000 will not be taxable. But it's an interesting point to remember. And second point, I'm again going back to the definition of property, and I'm just stressing now only on the first line. Property means the following capital asset of the assessee, namely immovable property being land or building. Now, a very common question which comes up here is, I have received agricultural land as a gift, or I have purchased agricultural land for much below the fair market value or the stamp duty value. So for example, my friend has an agricultural land. For some reason, he has gifted this agricultural land to me. और ये agricultural land, let us assume करते हैं कि ये एक market stamp duty value is 5 lakh. So 5 lakh is stamp duty value, and I have received this agricultural land. Whether this would be taxable? Now this is the very interesting point, because what has been mentioned, property means immovable property being land or building. Now the controversy here is, land and building will include agricultural land, but then the other question is following capital asset of the assessee. The word used is capital asset. So one school of thought is word used is capital asset. So let us go to provisions of section 214 which define capital asset, and under section 214 capital asset means land other than agricultural land. We are assuming it's a rural agricultural land. So let's assume this rural agricultural land is received, whether it will still be hit by 56(2)(10). And here interestingly you'll find we have an adverse judgment of the Jaipur tribunal in Trilok Chand Sen's case. The citation is given. So this is no doubt an adverse judgment, but personally, at my personal view on this point is that having read the judgment, I feel that the tribunal has not really gone into the actual definition of property which was given in 56(2)(7), where they have used the word following capital asset of the assessee. One school of thought is saying that no, the judgment is correct because section 214 you should apply only to capital gains, but there is nothing, that definition of 214 is given in the definition provision and not under the capital gain chapter. So when capital asset is defined under section 214, it is the same definition which will apply throughout the entire act and not only for a particular chapter of capital gains. So I personally feel that this judgment is not really the correct one, and this matter probably is not yet over. We will have much more litigation on this concept of agricultural land. So this is something, as I said, which is going to continue. It is not something which has already got over. ये चलता रहेगा. Okay. Then okay. Yeah. So coming to next point, undertaking. Now what about undertaking? So here you find that, let us say that there is a transaction of a case where I'm selling my business to you. So I have a running business. This running business is being sold to you, and let us say for whatever reason, let us say today's scenario is there that the businessman says, "Abhi COVID ke baad, I don't think I can survive in this business. I am ready to sell my entire business." तो मैं ये पूरा business आपको all assets, liabilities सब एक साथ, plant machinery, lump sum package, typically what we call as a slump sale आपको देता हूँ. Say the business today you can say is worth 50 lakh. I am ready to give it to you for 30 lakh only. मैं बोलता हूँ 30 लाख दे दो, बात खत्म. I want to get out of this. I don't want to continue. This is something we are actually going to see a lot in the days to come. So in this case, I'm not on the point of seller. Seller will be covered under slump sale, section 50B. We are looking at from receiver's point. I have received an asset with market value 50 lakh, but I have paid consideration of only 30 lakh. Should the 20 lakh difference be taxable? That is the question which comes up. So again, we go back to the fundamental definition of asset of property. Property means following capital asset of the assessee, and in which we have land and building, we have gold, jewelry, we have the shares, securities, and painting, drawing, sculpture, etc. Undertaking or business unit is not covered under the definition of property. And if it is not under the definition of property, this is outside the entire provision of section 56 to 10. So this will not be covered under section 56 definitely, right? Secondly, the next one you have is foreign trip. So very interestingly, what happens if you get a foreign trip free of cost? And I'm not talking of foreign trip in the course of, what we say, business. For example, ये target incentive होते हैं कि आपने इतना material हमारा बेच दिया तो आपको एक सिंगापुर trip मिलेगी. We are not talking of that. We are saying my friend sponsored my foreign trip. इसमें कोई business connection नहीं है. Not in the course of business. He took me for a foreign trip. Let's say आज उसने 2 लाख का खर्चा किया. 2 lakh he has spent for my travel to a foreign country. Okay, I paid nothing. Question is, he has spent for this foreign trip, and rather basically he gave me this foreign trip free of cost. Will it fall under definition of property? Again, you will find we read the definition of property. As I said, it's an exhaustive definition, and since it is an exhaustive definition, foreign trip will not be covered under property, hence not taxable. Plant and machinery also not covered under definition of property. Motor vehicles not covered under property. So today I find there is a motor vehicle, its market value is 3 crore rupees. There is a distress sale. I buy this same motor vehicle for 1 crore 25 lakh rupees. 1 crore 75 lakh rupees का saving हो गया मेरा. This difference will not be taxable because 56 to 10 में ये property के definition में नहीं बैठता. Motor vehicle is outside. Laptop. So if I receive a laptop, I buy a laptop for less than the fair market value, no problem. Again, I'm not covered under mischief of property. Same thing will apply for mobiles. Then comes a very interesting point, and that is cryptocurrency. What about cryptocurrency? Yeah, cryptocurrency, we know we are talking basically of something like bitcoins and similar currencies. Now, say I have received 10 bitcoins from somebody. मैंने उनको कुछ पैसा नहीं दिया है, कुछ नहीं. It's basically without consideration. So I'm not going into the money laundering act or the black money act and all that. Those transactions and this transaction will have to be tested against those provisions. Separate issue. I'm limiting my focus only on 56. कि समझो मुझे आज 10-20 बिटकॉइन छोड़ो, एक बिटकॉइन मिला. एक बिटकॉइन मिला तो भी वो लाख रुपए में जाता है. If I get that one bitcoin free of cost, question is it falling under the definition of gift? Meaning immovable property में नहीं है. Is it a property? Answer is no, it is not a property. Is it a sum of money? Cryptocurrency is not a legal currency. Since it is not a legal currency, therefore it does not fall under definition of sum of money. So cryptocurrency received will escape section 56. But please note, though it escapes section 56, you will be asked about questions about the source. You may be covered under the Money Laundering Act or the Black Money Act. Definitely the rigors of those acts will remain, but at least under income tax, you will not be covered as far as cryptocurrency is concerned. Next asset is lease rights. So transfer of lease rights. We are talking, I am from the angle of recipient. I am the recipient and I am receiving the leasehold rights from you. Now, when I receive the leasehold rights from you, what happens? As such, these rights fit into the definition of immovable property. So you'll find the word in properties, land, immovable property being land or building. That's it. So land or building is covered, nothing else. Leasehold rights will not fall under definition of property. So receiving of leasehold rights without consideration, inadequate consideration, not taxable under 56(2)(10). Intangibles. I might have intangibles like patents, copyrights. Someone transferred their patents, someone transferred their copyrights to me free of cost. Again, I paid nothing. It is a gift clearly, but patents, copyrights do not fit into the list of property. Definition of property not applicable. This transaction is not taxable. An interesting point used to arise, which has been taken care of now, and that is what would happen if you receive shares of a foreign company. अगर मुझे foreign company के shares मिलते हैं, whether the foreign company shares would be taxed. Answer is up to 31st March 19 there was a problem, because we had the rule 11U which was talking of the concept of valuation of the shares, and there they had used the word balance sheet was value was to be taken, but balance sheet for the foreign company was not what we can say mentioned, and therefore we found a problem that valuation rule failed. And since the valuation rule failed, the Mumbai tribunal itself in Keva Industries case has held that in the absence of valuation rules, principles of BC Srinivasa Shetty will apply. The machinery section fails, computation, the charging section will also fail, and therefore it is not taxable. After the error was identified by the government, they have amended the rule 11U from 1st of April 2019. So today, if I receive shares of foreign company under section 56(2)(10), answer is yes, very much so. That brings us to another very interesting area. Okay, I want 20 lakh from you. Situation A, I take it as a gift. If I take it as a gift directly, since you are only my friend, not my relative, we don't fit into any exemptions, it is 100% taxable as my income. No doubt about this at all. But then we say, okay, let's restructure the transaction. Let us treat this as an interest-free loan. I will not show it as a capital receipt that in my capital account showing that it is a gift. I will show this as a loan, and I will not pay you interest. You will also give me a regular confirmation that yes, this is an interest-free loan given. Question is, loan received without paying any interest. Can we say it is a receipt of money without consideration? Now, there we have a simple point that when I take a loan, the loan is taken with the obligation to repay. And if there is an obligation to repay, then logically what happens? The moment there is an obligation to repay, that itself is valid consideration. So the consideration is the obligation to repay. The Mumbai tribunal in the case of Chandrakant Shah in this case has said that okay, the section 56(2) will not apply in the case of interest-free loans, and the loan transaction, if at all is there, section 68 is there to take care to see whether the person is having credit worthiness and all that. So we will go to section 68. There is no need to cover it under section 56. Similarly, the Delhi High Court in the case of Mridu Dalmia, it has also observed that the moment you take a loan, there is an obligation to repay, and therefore there is a valid consideration. Cannot be covered under the rigors of, we cannot tax this under section 56. Then comes something more interesting. What happens if I get a deposit receipt, but which is convertible into money? For example, we have this case of Anuj Agarwal. In Anuj Agarwal's case, what had happened? The SAC had received the India Millennium Deposit Certificates. The State Bank of India, for those of you who remember, this is I think 20 years back, we had these India Millennium Bonds which were issued for the non-residents, and these India Millennium Bond certificates were gifted to Mr. Agarwal by somebody. Now, when this was gifted, the question arose, is this a receipt of sum of money? And there it was held that, okay, a deposit receipt is not a sum of money, cannot be taxed under the definition of section 56(2) as it stood then. But we further find that a deposit receipt like this also does not fit into the definition of securities. So it is not shares or securities, and therefore it is not fitted into definition of sum of money, nor is it property. So sum of money nahi hai, property nahi hai, so therefore it cannot be covered under section 56(2)(10). Another interesting issue which comes up is with respect to loan waivers. I'm sure there will be questions which are being raised. You can keep them in the chat box, no problem. I will take them at the end all together. Okay. So,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay.
People can go on putting up the questions in the chat box. I'll just take them at the end. Okay.
Yes, sir.
तो
Yes,
क्या
sir. Okay.
linking टूट जाता है.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Going to loan waiver. Something we have seen has always caused a lot of litigation in the past also, and now one more dimension has been added. I have taken a loan from a bank. The bank has now waived the loan. I have taken a loan from a third party, not a proper bank or financial institution. Third party has waived the loan. These are the typical cases where the question arises, is a waiver of loan taxable? The department has tried to tax this either under section 41(1) as the deemed income. Sometimes they have tried to tax it under section 28 Roman 4, saying that is this a benefit received during the course of carrying out of your business? And in most cases they have failed. The matter went to apex court, and there also the apex court laid down the principle saying in which case it could be taxable and in which case it is exempt. But now, after the amendment in 56(2), when the subclause 10 was introduced, now things became interesting, because now I have taken a loan from a bank, and this bank has waived a part of the loan. So I have taken a loan of 5 crores, of which I paid 4 crore, 1 crore principal was waived. Is this 1 crore waiver going to be taxable under section 56? That is the principle which we really have to understand. So first and foremost, can we say it is a property received or a sum of money received? Now, at the time when we received the gift, sorry, not the gift, at the time when we received the money, it was a loan. So जब हमने loan लिया बैंक से या third party से, it was clearly not covered under 56. Today, I have got a waiver of this loan. The moment I have got a waiver of this loan, today what has happened? I have now become absolute owner. I don't have to pay anything back to the lender. So can we say there is a constructive receipt today, actual receipt earlier, and there is a constructive receipt today? And on that point, could it be taxable? On this point, we have an adverse decision of the Mumbai Tribunal in Panna Khataus case. It was a 2015 judgment. But this judgment, if you read carefully, you will see the main focus, what the court said, that it is primarily a case of section 68. The assessee was not in a position to prove who are the lenders. He was not in a position to prove their credit worthiness. So basically, there was a problem under mainly section 68. There, in fact, the tribunal order, if you see clearly, says ordinarily this should be added under section 68, or officer has added under section 56. Okay, we uphold that addition. But that does not really mean that actually taxing the gift. Their intention was to tax the income under 68, but since officer has covered it under 56, they said, okay, chalta hai, वैसे भी तो add ही करना है, let the addition be upheld. So, though it is an adverse judgment, I would not really be inclined to take cognizance of it for section 56(2). Also, one more point is, can we really say the waiver of the loan is really a constructive receipt in current year? And is it a receipt of sum of money? Most importantly, is it a receipt of sum of money or a property? Now, I cannot fit it into property. Only question is it a sum of money? Now, my point on this is, we have a Supreme Court judgment in the case of Kasturi and Sons. And Kasturi and Sons has used, wherever the word money has been used, money has to be interpreted strictly, not money's worth. So, waiver of a loan is definitely not a receipt of sum of money, and therefore it should, in my personal opinion, not be taxable under section 56. Then we come to another area, and that is a very interesting area of debate, and that is with respect to the issue of shares. So typically original IPO वगैरह होता है, शेयर का shares allot होते हैं, and from time to time you would have rights issues, you would have bonus issues. So when I am an existing shareholder, and as an existing shareholder I am subscribing to the rights issue, what happens? Am I getting an asset for less than fair market value? And typically as rights issue में होता क्या है, that the market value of the share is 1000. Company says to existing shareholder will offer the same shares at 900 rupees. आपको concession 100 rupees का concession मिलेगा. That is the reason why people subscribe to the rights. So otherwise, why will the people subscribe to rights? They are getting a concessional rate. So whether this will result in a transaction which could be covered under section 56 to 10. Situation 1, what happens is, in a typical rights issue, chalo, people are subscribing. If people are subscribing to this rights issue, ordinarily, in my opinion, this should not be taxable. But we have two very interesting and contrasting decisions of the Mumbai Tribunal, one in the case of Sudhir Menon and another one in the case of Subodh Menon. So very interestingly, the Menon family has contributed to double controversy, though they are not the same. And what is the controversy here? If I receive shares, or rather I subscribe shares, can I say I have received the shares? Because shares get created on allotment. जब shares allot होते, that is the point the shares are created. Because I am holder of the original shares, I am getting the new shares and they get created on allotment. Company was never even owner of the shares. I became the first owner of the shares. Since I have become the first owner of the shares, there was no prior owner, so there is no question of me receiving it from somebody. This is one argument. Second point, the controversy which I would like to share, say a private limited company is there, rights offer is made, and let us say there is a disproportionate allotment. Out of 3 shareholders, 2 subscribed, 1 did not subscribe. If all are subscribing, there is no problem. We can say that, okay, the benefit goes to all. So it is originally the same shareholders and all of them are getting the same benefit which otherwise also they were entitled to because they were earlier holder of the original shares. But अभी A and B ने subscribe किया और C ने subscribe नहीं किया, there in a disproportionate allotment, what has happened? Section 56 shall be activated. This is what was laid down in the case of Sudhir Menon. Because they said it will increase the interest of one shareholder in the company or the assets, whereas the other shareholder का right automatically कम हो जाता है, उसका interest कम हो जाता है. In Subodh Menon's case, what happened? They said, of course, this was in the context of 56 to 7, which has now been replaced by 10. They said the section is meant to counter a tax evasion, to prevent money laundering and normal bona fide business transactions which should not ideally get covered under section 56 to 7, and therefore they said the difference between market value of the shares and the issue price should not be taxed under this provision. This was held in Subodh Menon's case. So we have conflicting judgments of the Mumbai Tribunal on this particular point, but Sudhir Menon stressed on one point, that we are not only on rights, we are on what issue. If it's a normal rights issue, ordinarily 56 to not applicable, but if it's a disproportionate rights issue, we are holding that yes, there could be a exposure to taxation under 56(2)(10). Next issue we have is with respect to bonus shares. With respect to bonus shares, I am a holder of an existing 1000 shares. I get 200 bonus shares. When I get 200 bonus shares, first is, am I really getting anything extra? And really the answer is no, because as the holder of the original shares, I was also having the proportionate right in the reserves of the company. By issue of bonus, what is happening? Those reserves are getting capitalized. Those reserves are getting converted into equity. That's it, nothing else. Earlier, pre-bonus, I had the same rights in the company. Post-bonus, I have the same rights in the company. So there is no really receipt of any fresh asset. Second argument here, which was in the case of Dr. Rajan Pai in the Bangalore tribunal, it was held that bonus shares is not really a receipt of property without consideration. Because to the extent आपके reserves कम होते, to that extent capital is increasing. So there is adequate consideration. On that ground, the Bangalore tribunal has also said in favor of the assessee, this transaction is not taxable. Then coming to another classic issue, and that is with respect to convertible securities. Now, with respect to convertible securities, what issues are there? Today, under section 56(2), in the exemptions, what is mentioned? When there are securities, following 4 transactions covered under section 47 are exempted under 56. Any asset received on total or partial partition of HUF, if there is a transfer by a company to wholly owned subsidiary or wholly owned subsidiary to its parent company, or in case of amalgamation and demerger. So these are the 4 areas, 4 types of transactions of transfer which are not taxable under 56. So if I receive the asset or money in the course of these 4 transactions, no problem. But then we have other transactions covered under section 47, and these other transactions covered under section 47, you have other problems. What happens under capital gain? If I convert my debentures into equity shares, preference shares into equity shares, then under section 47 it is said this is not a transaction of a transfer, there is no capital gain. Okay. Similarly, it was held for the earlier 4 cases also. But the earlier 4 points have been specifically covered under 56. So now the issue is, I have subscribed to debentures of a company, convertible debentures, compulsory convertible debentures, what we call as CCDs. And after the tenure is over, automatically they got converted into equity shares of the same company. Or a company has floated preference shares which are convertible. After the certain trigger point, they are now converted into equity shares. So in these cases, section 47 में capital gain का exemption मिलेगा, ठीक है. Is it going to be taxable under section 56(2)(10)? Because what may happen that I have purchased the debentures of 2 lakh, but today after 2 years when they got converted and the ratio of conversion was already assumed karte pre-decided, then today maybe the shares I am getting are worth 3 lakh rupees. So I am receiving shares of 3 lakh against my debentures of 2 lakh. There is a 1 lakh surplus. Could this be taxable under 56(2)(10)? That is the real question, because direct exemption is not available. It is officially not available. This is now going to be a case of interpretation. Very interesting issue is going to arise in this. So again, a view which I personally carry, and again I will always say these are views, these are not final solutions, because these are all yet to be tested. These are things which are yet happening. So in such a case, my personal view is that when there is a conversion of debentures to equity or preference shares to equity shares, all that is happening is your pre-existing rights are converted from one format into another format, and that too because of an agreement which was entered into at the time of original issue of the debentures at the time of original issue of the preference shares. So in my opinion, there is an adequate consideration, and this should ideally not be covered under 56(2)(10). That is my personal view. What would happen if company has issued loans or other taken loans, and these loans are today converted into equity? We have seen in many high profile cases where the banks have given loans and they have converted the loans into equity of that said company. Whether this could get covered under section 56(2)(10). Again, theoretically, yes, but I think if we go to the purposive interpretation, there is an obligation. That obligation of repayment is getting exchanged for equity of that company. Taking into account the intention of the statute, if we go to the purposive interpretation, this should not be taxable. But I will definitely say this is an area which is open for litigation. It is possible for the department to take a view कि इसको हम tax करेंगे under 56, and we may have to fight it out. But it should be our effort to try and convince at the assessment stage itself that there is a valid consideration and there is no hanky-panky in this transaction. And if we can get relief at assessment stage only, the problem should not arise. But again, we know that is not necessarily true always. Then coming to immovable property. So we are aware that what the section 56(2)(10) says, if an assessee receives an immovable property without consideration, inadequate consideration. No, without chodo, inadequate chodo, we are not on that. When do we tax it? Because there are three interesting dates which come up into the picture. Can we say you, the buyer, you, the recipient, you have received the immovable property at the time of allotment of the flat, or have you got it at the time of registration of the deed? Have you received it at the time of getting the possession? What is the point when we can say immovable property is received? Because देख लीजिए, registration एक साल में होगा, आपका allotment probably allotment पहले होगा, registration बाद में होगा, और possession बाद में होगा. So there could be 3 different years which are involved. So question is okay, difference है, tax भी करना है. Question will be which year are we going to take into consideration? That is going to be a very interesting challenge, because this is one area many of us have not even thought of, because this is a transaction which is going to become absolutely widespread in the next 2-3 years. Because post-COVID scenario, we know what is going to happen in the real estate sector. It's already dead prior to COVID. Now it has gone underground, and this people who have existing inventory, they would like to get liquidity, and to get liquidity there will be a lot of sales which will be much below the current ready reckoner value. Now when that happens, there will be issues for the buyers who could be our clients. There are issues under 43 CA for the seller, that's separate, but for the clients there could be an issue under section 56 who are the buyers. ठीक है, tax करना है तो कब करना है? Challenging the stamp duty value and all that is a separate issue. But point here is kab. When do I say I have received? We are aware that if we go to the Transfer of Property Act, registration of the document is necessary to get a title. So registration ke bina I cannot say I have received. Secondly, we also say possession is also equally important. So can I say a combination that if I have received the title plus the possession, that is the point I can say I have received an immovable property. So can I develop this line of argument कि I am receiving the immovable property not merely at the time of registration. Registration only gives me a right to buy the property, but I will get the ownership when this right to buy is combined with a possession. So I personally have come to the opinion that today, in case of a person who buys an immovable property for less than adequate consideration, then I will take the year of receipt where there is a transfer of title plus possession. In the sense, registration has taken plus there is also a possession. When this combination happens in that particular year, I personally feel that I would like to charge this particular transaction to tax. Next comes the issue with respect to the asset which is taxable under section 56. For example, I have received an asset as a gift. Say my friend has gifted me an immovable property, stamp duty value 50 lakh. 50 lakh की property मुझे gift में दे दी. He had purchased it for whatever, say 40 lakh. He has gifted it to me. That time stamp duty value was 50 lakh. Entire 50 lakh was treated as my income under section 56(2). वहां तक ठीक है. Now tomorrow when I go to sell this flat, section 49(4) of capital gain is very clear. Whatever was fair market value considered under section 56 will be taken as the cost. Fine. तो 50 लाख पे मैंने टैक्स भरा है, आज 50 लाख मेरी कॉस्ट ऑफ एक्विजिशन होगी, कोई इश्यू नहीं इसमें. इश्यू इज डिफरेंट. आई एम टॉकिंग ऑफ व्हाट अबाउट इंडेक्सेशन. See, my friend has purchased the flat in say 2010. He has gifted it to me in financial year 2000, say 18-19, and I have sold it in financial year 2021. So will my indexation begin from 18-19? Will my indexation begin from 2010? What shall be the holding period of the asset? Because here we have a section 49(1). Section 49(1) says in the cost of acquisition that if you have acquired the asset under 49(1), period of holding should begin from period of previous owner. I have received asset by way of a gift. अगर gift मिला है, period of holding goes back to previous owner. But I am allowed to step up the cost from 40 lakh of my friend to 50 lakh because of the specific provision of 49(4). कि gift पे tax भरा है, so you can step up the cost to the fair market value. So I am taking the cost of today. Holding period begins from 6-7 years ago. Whether indexation will begin from that 6-7 years ago or whether the indexation should begin from today. This is a very interesting point, a very interesting issue which is now arising. Because in the earlier cases, particularly if you have the landmark decision of Manjula Shah, Bombay High Court, wherein it was held that SAC had received the asset under 49(1). So High Court said cost to you is cost to previous owner. Holding period begins from previous owner. So therefore, even the indexation should ideally begin from previous owner and not from the day when you got the gift. So same principle can we apply here? This is the question. Now, I personally feel that this may lead to an absurd situation that I am taking the market value of say 2 years ago as the cost, but I am going to take the indexation from 10 years ago. In my opinion, that seems to be unfair. It seems to be what we will say against the principles of calculation. And I personally am of the view that better view would be to take the indexation from the date when the gift is there. Of course, for deciding long-term, short-term, I will consider period of holding of previous owner. But for indexation, my personal view would be a better view would be to begin the indexation from the date I received the gift and not from the date of the previous owner. Of course, I have several of my friends who have this view, we will take indexation from previous owner, but I have my personal reservations on the same. Then we have the issue relating to children, particularly adopted children. There is an interesting point. When we talk of relative, we say parents, lineal ascendant, descendant. Lineal ascendant, descendant, adopted child की case में दो होते, because he has got biological ascendant, descendant, and after adoption he has adopted lineage of ascendant and descendant. तो कौन सा line लेना? So here, if we go to the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, section 12 of the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act says, from the date of adoption, from that date, all the ties of the child in the family of his or her birth shall be severed and replaced by those created by adoption in the adoptive family. Yani all legal connection, relation with the biological family is legally cut, and hereafter only one relationship continues, that is relationship with the adopted family. So adoption के बाद रिलेटिव के डेफिनेशन में कौन आएगा? ओनली द अडॉप्टेड रिलेटिव्स, दैट इज द अडॉप्टेड पेरेंट्स जो है उनके अप एंड डाउन, दैट इज योर whatever uncle auntie जो भी है, but in the adopted family, not in the biological family. But of course we are talking of specific what would happen in the case of the Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists and Jains, because they are covered under the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act. In the case of trust, one more interesting issue comes up. Because tell me whenever we have to stop for question answers, tell me, because ये 56 ऐसा है कि हम चालू रख सकते हैं बहुत.
I know, sir.
So you tell me whenever I need to cut the how much time I have, so that I can conclude the issues by that time.
So we have 5-10 minutes. We can take more.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Because 56 ka seminar we can run for 3 hours also. It can just go on. It depends on how much we want to work. So continuing to the next interesting impact is what about the trust? A trust is receiving the donations. So it is mentioned under section 56 that the gifts received by a institution registered under section 12A, 12AA are exempt. Now if these are exempt, question arises, what happens if the trust violates the conditions of section 11? What happens if the trust violates the conditions of section 11 and 12 and it does not get exemption? Matlab kya? There is a charitable or religious trust. It is receiving the voluntary contributions. So ideally voluntary contributions are nothing but gifts, because trust ka main source of income hota hi hai gift ka. So now these trusts have received these gifts, ideally they are exempt under section 56. Now assume karte ki theek hai 56 is not applicable. Now they are covered under the provisions of charitable trust. Now the moment they are covered under charitable trust, if they violate some of the conditions of section 11-12, what will happen? They will not get the exemption under section 11-12, and automatically this would become income. So you don't have to come back to section 56 to tax it. The point here what I am saying, trust has received the donations, exemption hai trust ko under 56. That's absolute. Tomorrow the trust violates the condition of section 11-12, no problem, it will still be taxable, but under the provisions of section 11-12, because समझो इनको donation कुछ मिला था, and let us say out of that donation, say they were entitled to exemption of 10 lakh, they have violated the conditions, 10 lakh is today taxable, so ठीक है ना, directly tax हो गया under section 11-12, there is no need to take recourse to section 56. 56 would not come into the picture. A very major issue which will arise currently is what happens today in the COVID world and post-COVID world, the next 2 years, whatever we are going to see. What will happen if a person receives financial assistance from friends, well-wishers who are not relatives? Relatives, though out of question, they are exempt. It could be business needs, medical needs, educational needs. It could be just simply cost of living is being sponsored by somebody today. Anything could happen in the next period. So now the question is, ये जो financial assistance मिलती है, and it is spent also, nothing is remaining in your pocket, it is 100% spent. In this scenario, how would the treatment happen? Whether this would become taxable? That is the question which arises. Now here, the unfortunate answer is, apparently there is no exemption given under section 56 to 10 for these situations, and it is highly possible that such transactions could get taxable. Many times you'll find we have these crowdfunding appeals that okay, so and so person is admitted in hospital and each one is supposed to contribute, or एक online ad आ जाता है आपके Facebook पे, Twitter पे, किधर तो भी, and then you people we contribute, someone gives 100, 200, 500 ऐसा करके वो 10 लाख रुपए इकट्ठा होता है वो account में, and that is directly from that account goes to the hospital. Question arises in such cases, you have received 10 lakh without consideration, aggregate amount has crossed 50,000, entire 10 lakh is gone, in fact ज़्यादा भी गया अपनी जेब में से. Even then, unfortunately, there is no direct exemption given. Only silver lining I can see in the cloud is Finance Act 2019 का जो amendment है, wherein now they have given the power to CBDT particularly to notify certain situations or transactions where there may be no applicability of 56(2)(10). If appropriate representation is given, I hope if appropriate representation is made and the government is wise enough, the people at the tax ministry are wise enough, they may give some relief on these issues, but otherwise theoretically taxable. Many times a question arises, sir, we are a batch of schoolmates, अभी हम WhatsApp के कारण जुड़ गए, we have found one of our batchmate is not financially well off and he needs support. It may be a business support, it may be today he is ill, he needs medical support. All the friends decided to contribute and we know कि भाई इसको 20 लाख रुपए देना है, everyone is ready to contribute and 20 lakh का target cover भी होने वाला है. Now point one, if you all transfer these small amounts together to his bank account, it would definitely be taxable. A better route, if possible, could be to route it through a charitable trust, where all of you transfer the funds to a charitable trust, and the charitable trust, as a part of its charitable activity, gives it to your friend for whatever medical reasons, etc. That could be a better routing, but this is not always possible. If you follow that routing through a trust, definitely there is no question of 56(2)(10) for your friend also. So your mission wanted to help हो गया, उसका medical purpose serve हो गया without any violation or without any major impact of income tax. So that could be one benefit you could enjoy. Then buyback of shares. Is the buyback of shares going to be taxed? We are not talking of the shareholder. We are talking of the company. In the case of a company, if there is a buyback of shares at less than fair market value, of course, first question ये होगा कि अगर buyback हो रहा है, वो भी less than fair market value को, which shareholder is going to agree? But let's assume that for some reason the shareholders are ready to agree to sell their shares back to the company for less than fair market value. ये अपने rule 11 UA जो है valuation rule, as per that rule, let us say value of the share comes to 100 and the buyback is done at 80 rupees. So there is a 20 rupees discount. So company is going to buy back the shares at 80. Shares are worth 100 rupees fair market value. Will there be tax implication for company? We are not talking of shareholder, because for shareholder कोई implication आज है ही नहीं, because in a buyback case what will happen? The company will have to pay the tax under 115 QA on the distributed profits if any, and the transaction is exempted for shareholder under section 1034A. So shareholder की बात ही नहीं कर रहे, we are only on the company. So as far as company is concerned, for the company, what will happen? The buyback should not be taxable. Simple reason is there. If you go to the Companies Act section 68, what it says, that within 7 days, whatever shares or securities are bought back have to be destroyed. In other words, the law does not permit the company to hold its own shares. So how can we say that you have received any property, and therefore this transaction of buyback should not be taxable in the hands of the assessee, in the hands of the assessee company, right? So that is with respect to buyback, right? I think we have a lot of questions which have come up in the chat box. So let me start with the questions, because there are many issues which we have taken up. Let me just go through the questions one by one, and I'll start with the questions. What is the treatment of gift in cash to HUF by the members and vice versa? Now, first and foremost, when you talked of the definition of relative, what we read in the definition of relative, कि HUF की case में, as far as the HUF is concerned, every member of the HUF is a relative. So member of HUF is relative of the HUF. So if a member contributes to the HUF, there is no problem. Whatever HUF is receiving will not be taxed. Second part, what will happen if HUF is giving to members? HUF is giving to members. As I said, the relationship has to be looked at from whose angle? From the angle of recipient. तो पहले केस में HUF को मिला. All the members of HUF are relative. Directly, if you see definition of relative, last line clearly mentioned, members of HUF will be relative of the HUF. Fine. HUF receives from member, received from relative. But what if it is vice versa? I am a member of the HUF and I receive some gift from this HUF, जिसका मैं member हूँ. Now, if I receive a gift from these members, whether such a gift would be from a relative or is it not to be on the, is it not from a relative? So here you'll find, if you read the section specifically, they have used the word relative means, and since the word used is means, it clearly means that this is the exhaustive list and therefore it's a one-way traffic. HUF to members would not be fitted into relatives. Any member receives from HUF, I personally feel, will not be treated as received from relative. Of course, let me just share with you on this issue. Several cases are pending in the tribunals where the issue has already been taken up, and we'll see how this develops in future. But at this stage, my personal view on this is very clear. I will say receive of gift by a member from a member of HUF from the HUF will not be treated as gift from relative. In case of rights issue of shares, how to evaluate further? Company gives rights 100 where fair market value is 125. What is impact of 56? I've already just replied to this question. In fact, that question was put up before we had taken up this matter. So there is a trust which is distributing shares, which is their investment on closure of the scheme. Okay, so there is a charitable trust, and let us say, assuming it's a charitable trust, and this trust is getting closed for whatever reasons, and it is currently holding some shares, and these shares have a fair market value of 100, and cost in the books of the trust is 50. Share is distributed on closure. Now the question is, it is distributed on closure, then let us say I am a recipient of this, and let us say you are selling these shares to be for your book value of 50. And today as a recipient, I am getting a share of 50 rupees, a share for 50 rupees having fair market value of say 75 rupees. So ये 25 rupees मेरे लिए definitely could get a implication under section 56. Immovable property received from relatives such as brother at inadequate consideration, is it covered under gift tax? No. So say for example, there is a situation in which let us say I have a property which I want to take from my brother. हमारा internal agreement हो गया कि नहीं, भाई से ये घर खरीदना है या ये दुकान मेरे नाम पे करके लेना है, and हमारा agreed transaction है भाई, we are going to undertake the transaction for 30 lakh rupees. The ready reckoner rate is 2 crore rupees today, but it's an internal transaction between me and my brother, and therefore I would like to execute it at 30 lakh. Seller, buyer are willing. First point, transaction is with relative. You are going to receive this asset for inadequate consideration, correct? But from your brother. Since you are receiving it from brother, definitely you will be excluded from, you will be covered under relative and therefore exempt under section 56(2)(10). In case of a private limited company, there is a dispute between 5 shareholders. They want to raise money for expansion, and they got approval from rights issue from 3 shareholders holding 75% holding. What would be implications if only 3 shareholders subscribe to the rights issue and other 2 shareholders skip it? Okay, so this is another point which you have to keep in mind, that आज मैंने rights issue किया है, and this is, if I do a rights issue, all my shareholders don't accept, 3 of them have accepted, and remaining 2 have not subscribed to the rights, and maybe I've not even issued those additional rights to anybody else also, right? That is the issue. So ऐसी case में, whether this is a case of a disproportionate rights, yes, and therefore you will have to see whether the implications of Sudhir Menon will apply, and I feel you could be unfortunately covered by section 56(2). In this case, Sudhir Menon's case would apply. Any disproportionate issue of bonus shares is covered in 56 like rights. Bonus, I don't think you will have any disproportionate concept, because bonus, what happens, you have to issue to everybody. You can't say I will issue more bonus to X shareholder and less bonus to Y shareholder. So what if I put up all these multiple questions together? Common problem what we are seeing now is whenever there is a rights issue, there is a problem today, because either if all shareholders accept, problem solved. What if some shareholders subscribe, some of the rights are renounced to third parties buy, so again rights change of the existing shareholders. What happens if only some shareholders subscribe and some rights are not issued at all? So wherever these disproportionate rights are happening, you please read the judgment of Sudhir Menon HUF case. It's a very, very dangerous judgment, and until and unless some concession is given by CBDT, these issues are going to arise on a day-to-day basis. This is definitely going to be a major problem in the days to come. And further, let us understand, today private companies, we are allowed to issue shares having disproportionate rights. Voting rights kam hai, jada hai, no rights. So many types of securities we are nowadays allowed to issue. So this is again going to cause a lot of problem. Another question. Sir, my client purchases a property at 1.8 crore. Stamp duty value of the same is 2.7 crore. Assessing officer has added the 90 lakh difference as income because the assessment has got time barred. You have requested for DBO valuation and filed appeal with the CIT. DBO valued the property at 2.1 crore. CIT considered the DBO valuation and partly allowed the appeal. Can you challenge the DBO valuation? Because there are too many lacunae in his valuation. Of course, the DBO valuation can always be challenged. Let us be very clear. You can always challenge the DBO valuation. We can have our own registered valuer, and you can use the help of a registered valuer and his report. And in fact, in many times we take a registered valuer to the tax authorities to represent and to argue and counter the various errors which are there in the DBO valuation report. It is possible for you to definitely contest the DBO valuation. There are several case laws on the DBO valuation. I'll see whenever I will share it with Nikunj, and Nikunj can share it with you. I don't have the reference offhand, but yes, you can challenge the DBO valuation, definitely. I personally have done it and done it successfully. Company has given loan of 1 crore to contractor. Amount is shown as loan and advance in the books of company, and interest was also provided on it later. Later, the company entered into agreement with the same contractor for setting up a factory of 5 crores and agreed to pay 4 crores balance in a phased manner. Contractor started work and spent 90 lakh work after getting permission from government. However, due to bad economic sentiments, company has cancelled the project. Now, contractor wants to forfeit the loan of 1 crore which has been received by him, against which he has already spent 90 lakh towards work. Whether it would attract section 56, how much would be taxable amount? Now, at the very outset, what we said, that waiver of a loan per se, could it be treated under section 56? As I said, that is a area which is right now not 100% a confirmed area. Personally, I carry a view that section 56 ideally should not apply to loan waivers. If at all loan waiver hai, you get covered under the provisions of business profession and not here, because this loan was taken during the course of business. Afterwards, it got converted into an advance for work. Now, this is a very interesting point. originally you have got this money as a loan. Later on, you entered into a contract with the lender, where the lender now says कि नहीं, ये loan नहीं है, treat it as a contract advance since we have given you a contract project of worth rupees 5 crores and treat this 1 crore as an advance given to you. So what was originally a capital receipt has already undergone a characteristic change, and from capital receipt it has now become a revenue receipt. It is now an advance for work to be done. And okay, you have spent 90 lakh rupees against the same. I personally feel the section 56 will not come. Business profession में आपको ये लेना पड़ेगा, where the 1 crore loan would be treated as an income against which the 90 lakh expenditure should be expensed off, and only the 10 lakh would be taxed, but not under section 56. This would be taxable in my view under business profession and not under section 56. Okay, the trust is not a charitable trust. We are on that earlier question. Trust is not a charitable trust. It is a venture capital trust. For my question, closure of the scheme and distributing the investment on closure, being shares on closure of the scheme, fair value is 125, cost is 100. Okay, so fine. So there is a venture capital trust, and at the time of closure of this venture capital trust, today all the assets are being distributed. And today, let us say I am going to be a recipient of the shares, and as a recipient, 100 rupees is the cost to the trust, but market value is today 125. Now today, if I receive it, now if I receive it, in my opinion, definitely if I'm receiving it for less than the market value, the difference should be taxable, but not in the hands of the venture capital, in the hands of the recipient. Items not covered under 56 to 10, like undertaking foreign trip, will it be not covered under any other income and taxed under section 56? Now, whether it can be taxed under 56 will depend on case to case basis. For example, you receive a foreign trip. I'll give you a classic example. What I said, my foreign trip is sponsored by my friend. If it is sponsored by my friend, then there is no question of being taxable as an income at all whatsoever, because it is not covered under 56 to 10, and it does not have a character of income at all. To be covered under other sources also, under general income under other sources also, there has to be characteristic of income. And if it is not income, there is no question, no way we are going to tax it under income from other sources also, right? Of course, in some of those cases like undertaking, etc., there will be capital gain implication for the seller, but no implication for the buyer. I think I've run through all the queries, Nikunj.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yes, and it has been a pleasure taking this session, because it gave me an opportunity to revisit section 56. Because I say seminars karte to it gives us time to revise and learn. In fact, for the seminar, we learn much more than probably the participants, because we have to do a lot of homework for this. So thanks to the Bhayantar group for giving me this opportunity of learning section 56 to all over again. Thank you.
आपके बोलने से लगा नहीं आप भूले थे कुछ?
हाँ?
तो आपके बोलने से लगा तो नहीं सर आप कुछ भूले थे? रिविजिट करने वाली बात ही नहीं आई कहीं. Already. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of Bhayantar CA Social Group, I thank you for your immense contribution, sir. What was wonderful was, sir, you dug real deep into the topic. In fact, somebody taking cryptocurrency in section 56 is big, sir. It really shows your commitment. Thank you so much, sir. I now have Amar Bhai Kakadia on the line. Amar Bhai shall be giving the formal vote of thanks, sir. Amar Bhai, are you there?
Yeah, I hope I'm audible, and thanks a lot, Nikunj bhai, for giving me an opportunity to thank Subodh sir, because I was fortunate to get training under him. That was my first job in my career, and in fact, I was also fortunate to have to attend his classes for a period of more than 3 years. In fact, not only me, but thousands of students have been benefited like me with the kind help of Subodh sir. I'll just say that a good teacher is like a candle; it burns with fire. It itself burns with fire to enlighten the path of others. Thank you, Subodh sir, for your valuable time and taking us through section 56. And I'm sure Vasai branch as well as Behind the Study Circle will get in touch with you in future again to have more sessions with you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Nikunj, I will share the PPT with you and you can share it with the members.
Sir, I'll share it. I'll get it done. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
to all the participants.
Yes. Thank you very much for
Unmesh ji,
your. Yes, sir.
ji. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Thank you to
Thank
all
you.
of you for this nice session, and especially to Subodh sir for sparing time with us. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay. Subodh sir, thanks a lot. I'll connect you. Connect with you offline.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
This conference will now be recorded.